This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Judge Jeanine Pirro.
She's the outspoken host. Judge Jeanine Pirro is dominating the headlines right now.
This is the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday Morning Show. Now, here's Judge Jeanine Pirro.
Welcome, everyone, to the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Foundation Show. I hope you're enjoying your day so far. It is a beautiful day here in New York City. And as always, we're armed and ready to serve justice with all my great listeners here on the Red Apple Audio Network. So much that happened this week. I got to tell you, folks, get ready. You had 4 years of vacation with that halfwit in the White House, Joe Biden, who didn't show up before he closed down the press office. And now nobody can keep up with President Trump. He just keeps cranking out those executive orders. He flies from one country to the next. And he is doing everything he can to be as visible and transparent to the American people as possible. And this week we were able to see a joint interview between Elon Musk and Donald Trump on the Sean Hannity show. And I must tell you, I thought it was fascinating. You had two people there, one the president of the United States, who is not at all intimidated or worried about sharing the lights with Elon Musk, unmistakably the most successful businessman in the world today, and not afraid to answer questions jointly. And I was fascinated with how they were so in tune with each other. You know, you hear like, oh, there's tension there. You know, they're not going to be able to get along. Well, they got along so well, folks, that they ended up finishing each other's thoughts and sentences. I thought it was really, really interesting. And Elon Musk was deferential to the president, as he should be. And the president was very complimentary toward Elon Musk and his gang of geniuses. And the president had absolutely no concern about the fact that he has the right, statutorily, to appoint someone as a special government employee. Folks, there are thousands of them every year that are appointed and work in the administration and the executive branch. And the president has a right to bring in whomever he wants. And by the way, there are thousands, as I said, SGEs, as they call them, who work, you know, in various government agencies like the IRS. And nobody questions whether they're going to have access to information. But what's happening now with Elon Musk is he's already identified $50 billion in waste and fraud. And I have to tell you, this is no surprise. And this is because of the bureaucracy. You know, because I said to someone, well, who is saying that money should be going to these countries for a trans opera in Ecuador? And they said to me, it's the bureaucracy. It's like they just put in these requests and the requests are granted. Never has one been denied, even if the money is going to a terrorist organization, a fraudulent organization. And they say the bureaucracy just puts in, you know, the request and it is funded. And obviously, folks, you and I both know there's a kickback there. Of course, there's a kickback there. And by the way, why the hell should we be paying for a trans opera in Ecuador? Shouldn't they fund their own trans opera? I mean, this is so ridiculous. I can't stand it. But anyway, it is what's going on, and the left is going nuts. And so 14 attorney generals from around the country, all Democrat, they go to their favorite federal judge forum shopping, and they say to Tanya Chutkan, I never get her name right. She was the one who sat on Trump's Washington case. And tried to get it going with Jack Smith. But even she had to admit that those 14 attorneys general, who were trying to shut down Donald Trump, didn't have any imminent harm that would allow for her to issue a temporary restraining order. Even she knew that they didn't have sufficient basis in law. So, folks, what we've got, fortunately, is a man who hates waste and fraud, who has a history of taking over businesses like Twitter and coming back with like a third of the staff and the expenses and making it successful. So we're going to talk today with Kimberley Strassel, who is brilliant. She is with the Wall Street Journal. We're going to talk to her about some of the things that are going on. She, of course, writes an article called Potomac Watch, and she is really smart, everybody. And then we're going to be talking to Paul Stone from Colonial Metals Group about how interest rates and how DOGE and how everything that's going on is impacting you, and, you know, how we can get manufacturing back into the United States. So we've got a great show for you today, and it's coming up right here in a moment on the Red Apple Audio Network.
Now, it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Judge Jeanine.
Hi, I'm Jeanine Pirro, and this is Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Today, we're talking about DOGE and all the money that's being saved for Americans, but you got to start thinking about the money that you can save for yourself.
It's the Judge Jeanine Show. This is the Jeanine Pirro Show. Now, here's Judge Jeanine Pirro.
Welcome back to the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Foundation Show. Joining us now is a columnist and author who is a member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board. She writes a weekly column called Potomac Watch. I've known her for many years. I've followed her for many years. And, folks, she is really smart. And I value her opinion, as do many Americans. Please join me in welcoming Kimberley Strassel to the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Foundation Show. It's no surprise, just for those of you who might want to know a little about her CV. She graduated from Princeton and, the Woodrow Wilson School of Public Affairs, and she's just really smart. I'll let it go at that. Now, hi, Kimberley. How are you?
Hi, Judge Jeanine. Well, the admiration, as you know, is mutual. So thank you for that. I'm very honored to be here today.
Thank you. And, my listeners are going to be thrilled to hear your take on some of the stuff that has been happening. And, it's 4 weeks. He's been in office 4 weeks, President Trump. And one of the things that I want to start with is one of your editorials where you talk about the fact that, all the president's legal antagonists in one of your Wall Street Journal editorials, you talk about the lawsuits and the legal antagonists, and there's something like 60 lawsuits within the first 3 weeks. And you say that they've been planning these lawsuits since he got the nomination. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think people really need to understand this, that these lawsuits that are flying in, there was an army of lawyers, state attorney generals, and others who were listening to him on the campaign trail, listening to his campaign promises, and as he became even more refined in what he was calling for after he won the nomination, tuning in even more closely. They've been putting together the outlines of these lawsuits long before he even won election on the possibility that he would, so that they would be ready to hit him no matter what. And I find that fascinating, as you obviously would understand, is that they didn't even bother to see what he did yet. That says everything about their intention, is that whatever he was going to do, they were prepared to legally claim it was wrong without even seeing any print words on paper.
And the amazing part of it is, if you look back at President Trump's first term, there were many more successes in terms of these lawsuits compared to the second term, where even Tanya Chutkan,
Chutkan.
Yeah.
Chutkan.
Yeah, sorry about that. Where even she said, we're not seeing enough imminent harm from me to issue a temporary restraining order, which was kind of shocking, but he is doing so much better this second term in terms of not that these lawsuits have been resolved, but in terms of the immediate remedies that the left has been seeking.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, if you look back at the first term, they did have to wait to see what he put out. And as a result, they did respond to what he was doing. And they kind of picked their spots in some really big things. For instance, they put a lot of attention on his immigration orders in his first term. Now, by the way, they lost on the biggest ones there. But initially, you saw a lot of judges who bought into that. This time around, I think two things are happening. One, as noted, some of their theories that they're throwing out there are so wild, so circumstantial, without any evidence of anything actual harm happening, or even legal arguments to be made, that they're not getting anywhere. But the other thing that's really important is that for all the time that they have spent getting ready for these lawsuits, Judge, the Trump team has been spending 4 years getting ready to put this new agenda into place. And they have a lot of really smart legal people. And I would argue that the vast majority of the policies that Trump is putting out in executive orders are on very solid legal ground because they have been studied and vetted by lawyers.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And I think you can look at even, I think it's his deputy chief of staff, Stephen Miller, with the American First policy. Or project, and a lot of the lawsuits that they have been bringing, that they are knee deep in research on this stuff and are very, very focused on, having prepared as well. But, with the DOGE and Elon Musk and the freak out on the part of the left, saying that, it is good for waste, fraud, and abuse, but you've got to allow for the normal congressional process to occur in terms of identifying that fraud, waste, and abuse. And we hate Elon Musk. First, it was a constitutional crisis. Then it was he's acting as the president. And then, the president is very different this term, I believe. He's bringing Musk out. He's bringing him into the Oval Office. They did that joint interview with Sean Hannity together. They were like a married couple. They were finishing each other's sentences. And I said to myself, talk about simpatico. And there was also deference by Elon Musk toward the president. Like, it's what the president wants. I found that fascinating. The whole thing, a dynamic that is very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's two things. One, I do think that Elon Musk is really truthful when he says he has a lot of admiration for Donald Trump. Remember when he came out with his endorsement? It was right after the assassination attempt. And I think he was pretty bowled over by the president's courage at that moment. But if you go back and you read that Walter Isaacson biography of Elon Musk, which I did, it is absolutely fascinating. There are few things that drive Elon Musk more bananas than waste and inefficiency and lost money. And, he spent years weeding out any of it from his own company.
Interesting.
And so he's passionate about this. There's these great stories about how it just drove him absolutely bananas, some of the things that they were expected to buy for his space rockets, because that's what the government suggested you had to do when it was, 300 times the cost of what you could buy it for. And he didn't understand why anyone would do that. And so you can tell he's got experience as well and annoyance at the way the federal government loses money. And so he's perfect to do this job.
That's very interesting. I wrote down the name because I have not read that bio, but I also understand, Kimberley Strassel, that Elon Musk gave the patent for the electric vehicle to his competitors because, he had it, he made his car, and it was like, if this can help people, he'll do it. And that he has been very generous in terms of, how he handles his success, like he did Starlink with Ukraine and North Carolina and, with the astronauts who are up there in Boeing can't bring him back. I mean, he's a very generous kind of guy with a generous spirit, and yet the left hates him so much. Why?
Well, The left loved him. They loved him. They adored him all the way up until he bought Twitter. And then all the way up until, and dared to talk about the First Amendment. And look, never forget that Elon Musk is an immigrant to the United States. And I think that also helps define him in a lot of the ways, in the same way that a lot of people who land on these shores remain so amazed, mesmerized by the American Constitution and the freedoms that are guaranteed here. And, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, it was clear he was animated by one thing. That was not a fantastic business deal, but he was animated by restoring free speech. He'd come to see how deeply important social media was to the public square and talking. And that began his transformation in politics. We've seen it ever since. But and that also began the left's slow decision now at full peak that they can't stand the guy.
It's amazing they can't stand him. And, it's almost like, it's these low intelligence people who are like, yeah, he's trying to be the president. No, he isn't trying to be the president. And if there is a conflict, the president will keep him out of that. But out of anything that will impact whatever businesses, he is conducting. And there's got to be some recognition that the guy is so brilliant. I mean, he's a genius. And these tech kids that he's brought in with him are also geniuses. And the left, I mean, how do they justify it with a straight face? Is it just as simple as they're being found out for all the corruption? Or is it that they just believe that these programs need to be funded? Like, why doesn't Ecuador fund its own, trans opera? Why do we have to fund it?
Yeah. I find this completely bizarre, Judge. Like, why Democrats would think that this was a hill to die on? I mean, because here's the thing. We as Americans can disagree about how much government we think is the right amount of government, right? Mm-hmm. But here's one thing all Americans agree on. Government generally sucks, right? It doesn't do a good job. You might believe that the government should be in the business of providing more welfare, but and some of us would say, no, it shouldn't. But we can all agree that whatever the role it has in welfare, it does it poorly. Mm-hmm. And that is something that Americans across the country understand, which is why I cannot understand why Democrats would stand there and be like, no, we really want to keep waste, fraud, and abuse. Don't touch anything in government. It's so perfect the way it is. Nobody thinks that. But I think one of the answers to this is, this party has become so reflexively the anti-party. If Republicans say it, they will say no. They have lost any member of the party willing or able to agree with a Republican, even on a good idea. I mean, that's how far they've come from, say, the days of Bill Clinton. And I think it's why you saw their problems at the polls.
I want to thank you, Kimberley Strassel, for joining us. And I hope that you'll come back, Kimberley, because we absolutely love you. We appreciate what you do. Everybody, Kimberley Strassel, the Wall Street Journal, the Potomac Watch. She's really, really smart. Thank you, Kimberley Strassel.
This is the Jeanine Pirro Show. Now, here's Judge Jeanine Pirro.
Welcome back to the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Foundation Show. Joining us is Paul Stone, the CEO of Colonial Metals Group. And we're going to be talking about the impact of DOGE and what the president is doing with tariffs and how it impacts gold and silver. So join me in welcoming Paul Stone to the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Foundation Show. With Donald Trump now in the White House, a lot is changing. Mm-hmm. All right. And one of the first things that we're talking about is DOGE and what he's doing with Elon Musk. And of course, the Dems are going crazy. They think it's unconstitutional. And the truth is that the president, as a CEO, has the right to bring in whomever he wants to review things. In fact, he has a constitutional obligation to make sure the congressional appropriations are properly issued. Right. So we are now in this kind of catch-22 where the Democrats are saying, don't look under the hood. And everyone else is saying, we all have this feeling that there's corruption abound in the federal government. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts, just as the government itself as an ecosystem has no dry runs as it tries to conduct the business it's trying. So it can't rehearse. It can't memorize lines. These people come together and they haven't really worked together before. They haven't done this job before. They certainly haven't managed a $20 trillion economy before. They haven't managed 350 million people before. Even a CEO that might manage a business that has 10 or 100,000 employees, at least that man or woman understands their little ecosystem, the supply chain, the customers, all the stuff that goes along with making a company profitable. And that's the last piece. The government doesn't have to turn a profit. It doesn't ever have a board that slams their head against the wall for messing up a project or cost overruns or delays. Like, imagine if the government was a construction business. And that's where Trump is so perfect to run the government. He's from a business that is so cutthroat, sometimes the building, you might have a storm that causes damage to the building while it's under construction. You got to deal with that. You got to plan ahead. You got to think so far down the road, and you start with houses. Might renovate an apartment, and then it's a house, and then it's a small building, and then it's bigger buildings. The government never has a chance to actually practice at what it does. So they're never really going to be any good at what they do. And so you certainly shouldn't ever give them a lot of power.
Yeah, and you know what? They're not only not good at what they do, Paul, but there are no consequences for when they do poorly.
Because they don't have to turn a profit. So there's nothing to really compare them against. Football teams, basketball teams, women's volleyball teams, women's basketball and soccer teams have to win.
Yeah.
That's their profit, is winning. So there's no pressure like that on a government. That's why the framers thought it should be a small thing, kind of a conduit between states, between foreign affairs, but never more powerful than a state.
Yeah. And so now we've got $50 billion so far that DOGE has identified as waste, fraud, and duplicity. We don't know. And yet, all of this money is not necessarily going to governments. It's going to NGOs.
Right.
So these non-government organizations are getting money. And the question is, why? And is someone getting a kickback for that money? So why is the bureaucracy is identifying money that goes to an NGO? It's not even a congressional authorization. That makes no sense to me, that these bureaucracies and middle managers can say this much money goes to this Green New Deal and we're going to send it out to these 10 different organizations, and no one knows ultimately what the money's used for. Like, why shouldn't Ecuador pay for their own drag queen operas?
Yeah. We've all seen probably enough spy movies to understand these little programs get innocuous names like the ones you're mentioning now, but the money didn't even go to that. It went to something else.
Right.
But what we really need to do to benefit from this review and this inspection and this analysis that DOGE is doing is understand those are symptoms of something much deeper. We don't want to run around treating symptoms or try to, curtail the actions of these government people and get them to act differently. That's not where we want to spend our time. We want to gut the government. You gut the government, and then you gut the people and their capabilities to do silly stuff like this. Like, you can't rub oil of Olay on your skin to fight cancer.
Right.
We got to go to where we got to trace the symptoms back to the source. The source is the government has the ability to create money. So they're trying to act like the businesses that are in their offices Monday through Friday lobbying for what they want. Mm-hmm. They're trying to become a financial center. That's not what a government can never be, a financial center. Obama coined the term, we're making investments. It used to be we're going to raise taxes or spend money on stuff. Now he coined that term, we're going to invest in energy. We're going to invest in green. We're going to invest in people. We're going to invest in this. It's hooey because they have no experience investing in a damn thing that actually turned out well.
So you're in favor more of the private sector doing this stuff and not the taxpayer.
Offload all of it. Department of Education should have been privatized and money just sent or power sent really to corporate entities that would cooperate with states and counties and towns to deliver on the right.
How about you leave it to the states?
Right, but still, even when you have to remember, the ethic is if you have to turn a profit, you're going to create one, you're going to do a great job, you're held accountable by the pressure of the sport itself. And when you don't, even state governments don't have to turn a profit. They have to live more nimble than the Fed because the state can't print money.
You are so right about that,
But if the Fed can print money, then you are going to have a government that ruins your life and ruins your world and ruins your country and ruins your finances, because what's nuts about the Democrats and all their screaming is that what they can't wake up to is, well, it was printed money anyway, and we shouldn't be doing that because the whole currency can die. The dollar's only worth 3 cents. And then what do we have? We don't have any money to give anyone, and we can't do anything, and now we don't even have a government job.
Okay. The amazing part of what's going on with DOGE is that they've identified $50 billion so far as waste, fraud, and abuse. And now people are getting into the issue of, should that be money that, first of all, it's no money. They're just saving it. It's not like they're recouping it. And they're saying, well, should we get a rebate? Maybe if it gets $2 trillion back, should we get a rebate? I mean, how does this benefit the taxpayer?
Well, you're still talking about printed money. So when the government has to live off of tax revenue, then those conversations about raising taxes, read my lips, no new taxes. Here's welcome to Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Right? George H.W. read my lips, no new taxes, got a recession going in an election year. Welcome Bill Clinton to the White House.
Right.
Because he raised taxes.
Right.
And everyone, in my opinion, and we all can just, guess at stuff, but in my opinion, the entire world that would throw money at a politician, and politicians themselves learned, don't raise taxes. Did you ever hear about raising taxes ever since then? Yeah. No. They just printed the money. They said, oh, my God, if the government has a shortfall, don't raise taxes, just print money.
And that's where you come in. And yeah, I didn't intend to go there, but that's where you come in when you talk about colonial metals. Okay, so if the dollar's worth 3 cents, metals are going through the roof right now.
Right. So if gold starts its journey when Nixon cuts ties with it.
In 1971.
Right.
Remember that, folks. Paul Stone told you, 1971.
Yeah. If it's $50 an ounce back then and today it's tapping on 3,000, don't be happy about that. Be horrified, because It's not a stock that's improving its earnings and improving the country, its market share in the world. It's not adding new lines to its business. It didn't get a drug approved. Gold and silver is not a product. It's a location. It's a bunker. So if more and more people around the world are saying, businesses and governments and wealthy folks and central banks are saying, just give us all the gold you can find, they're hoarding a safety element to their finances. Gold and silver is a bunker, if you will. Why would you need a bunker? Well, there's a threat. Well, where's the threat coming from? So if the threats are so serious that gold has gone from 50 to 3,000 an ounce, that's a measurement of how horrific your fundamentals have eroded in your financial world. That you are starting to build homes on sand or sheets of ice instead of on stone.
So, Paul Stone, no pun there. How do tariffs play into this, in terms of the international scene? We all know that President Trump is using tariffs as leverage, and I have no problem with that. I love it. If you don't want to take your criminals back, was it Pirro in Colombia?
Right.
Good. We'll just raise your tariffs or whatever it is, whatever the game is. How does that impact gold?
Well, the last time, we haven't heard of it, Bill Clinton gave China favored nation trade status, and our elected officials, they're so brilliant. They made it a permanent law a year later. This is the early 90s. And so what that meant was there were no tariffs charged on China's stuff coming in.
Right.
And so now we don't hear about tariffs forever until Trump pulls this out of dusts it off the shelf. It hadn't been used in decades when he had his first term. And gold went up about 70% during his first term. The main thing you want to recognize about these actions is what are theirs going to be. Because in my mind, in March of 2018, Trump slaps tariffs on China. And in December of 2019, China slaps COVID on America.
Isn't that interesting? I never heard that.
The retaliation piece is where individuals have to look.
Say that again.
So he's playing his sport, right? He's putting these things in place. One, you want to help bring jobs back to America.
Right.
You tell American corporations, hey, this crap you're having made in China is going to cost 25% more to bring it over here. Why don't you just set up some factory operations here and have Americans work here? Because now you've created the wiggle room to afford an American worker. Right? Because it's going to cost more anyway. So now you say, well, if the thing that we brought over here costs us $10 to make, now it's going to cost us, $12.50 to make and sell here. Does that give us the room to have an American worker in the mix, and we'll just make this stuff here again?
Yeah.
That's what it tries to kind of do. I mean, I don't know what other benefit would be other than a negotiating chip. But what you have to really look at is every action has a reaction, right? So when Trump slaps punishment and embarrassment on an honor system, these are the folks that will supplicate. And rather, if they dishonor their king, their boss, their family, they will just take a 12-inch blade and gut themselves.
Yep.
So you're dealing with China's an honor country. With that honor thing, they can't deal with mistakes. It's like Chernobyl when you saw the movie on Netflix where there's lead on the ground and the communist guy's like, that's not lead. And the engineer's like, that's lead. The only place you find lead in a nuclear reactor is in the core. So if you're looking at it on the ground, your core exploded.
Yeah.
It's like the worst thing that could possibly happen. So they're going to deny.
So
you can't embarrass China. Yes, they embarrassed the living hell out of them. Made them look small, weak. They were exposed as the beta, not the alpha. Yeah. So what'd they do? And guess where COVID first showed up? Everywhere Chinese like to visit. Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, right? Italy.
And they crippled us.
They did that intentionally. Yes, they did. And that's how they'll play. They don't give a damn. And their own people will suffer. They don't care.
They shut down the city.
Right. And they just locked people up, built cardboard buildings, locked them away. All they care about is world domination. Isn't that the only thing communism cares about?
Yeah.
That's what the Soviets cared about.
Yeah.
They were putting nukes in Cuba.
Yeah.
So when we look at the action taken by Trump, what are the reactions to us? Trump's not doing anything wrong. He's playing hardball. Hardball has to be played. And that's where Americans, I remember when McCain was running, he said this country's turned into a bunch of wimpy people. We got to look out for, have we become wimpy, and what can we withstand as Trump tries to make America great again? You got to break eggs to make an omelet, and you got to knock heads around sometimes, and that's going to cause us some inconvenience. Maybe things become more expensive. It's the retaliation side we got to look at.
Okay. All right. But now what it seems like is, where are we with China right now?
Well, we are in the most precarious. Just any bit. No one in this room would, no one watching would allow critical systems, critical elements to your existence with a heart beating in your chest to be made by a communist country.
Okay. All right.
So that's where we are. They make everything.
Yeah, they make our medicines, Paul.
Well,
they make our medicine.
Here's a couple, and we got to say, China didn't take this. They didn't come here and negotiate.
We gave it to them.
Our elected officials made it possible for our American corporations to kill American jobs and replace them with jobs in China. In 1990, out of 100 transactions that would go off in America, 82 of those transactions happened on stuff made here. Today, 11.
Amazing.
74,000 manufacturing firms have closed in this country since 1990. That's 23 manufacturing firms in every county in America to try and internalize just how massive that is. You don't have 23 7-Elevens in a county.
So how do we change that?
Great question.
How does it?
Okay,
how does it happen?
Knowing that I haven't figured all this out, and no one has, because no one's ever been here before.
You're pretty smart if you can figure this out.
But if you go to principles... Principles are what guide a life full of mystery. Truths guide you through the unknown because you are holding on to something that will not shift shape. A truth, a principle. Sun comes up tomorrow. Things that will just absolutely always be there. Truths, principles. So you say, is the strongest element to a country the fact that it makes stuff? This is why Dominican Republic doesn't have an economy. It sells lobsters that aren't from Maine. And avocados. Like, they don't have anything to offer and to create revenue. And so they have a crappy place to visit, so they don't even have great tourism because it's not a safe place to go visit.
Right.
So when you look at the strength of a country, it'll be off what it offers, what it creates, what it produces. We used to make stuff. That's what made America great in the first place. To bring that back, you have to look at playing... You have to look at some tough choices. And there's no way to have half of it back and half of it gone. There's no in between.
Is Trump on the right track?
I would give American corporations 1 year to no longer ever have anything made. And after a year, you don't get to bring anything into America from outside this country.
So that is American corporations.
Yes.
So if you make your stuff in China, forget about the tariff. You're not bringing it in.
Yeah, you got a year to move your factories back, and I don't give a damn. And yes, that's going to create economic hell for us, but it'll also create economic hell for China because they don't get our money anymore. And it might make them desperate. They make some moves to try and sequester our economy in a big way and make us slave to their empire, but they won't win because principles and truths always win. Falsehood, Hitler, Stalin, Lenin, communism, socialism can't win because it's not human. It isn't aligned with what the iron that flows through our blood to want to be free, produce, own what we created, work hard, sacrifice. All that stuff is what humans all about.
So we're relying on one man who understands the game. Donald Trump understands business. He gets the power. He gets the leverage. He's got 4 years. So, I mean, how much can be done in 4 years?
So
I mean, doesn't it throw us back, Paul Stone, to the issue of you can't invest in the American dollar? I mean, that in the end, that it is it's gold and silver that are always going to be the constant benefit.
Because they're real. The dollar was real when it was backed by gold. So just think of paper as a better way to carry gold and silver. And it took a while to invent that. Our paper money is a top secret recipe, and it's 65% linen. Yeah. It is impossible to recreate that feel, but it's also kind of indestructible, right? So when you look at in my opinion, when you look at the invention of that kind of paper, you don't have to carry gold and silver anymore because I carry a billfold instead of a satchel on my hip that jingles when I run for the bus. And, I don't like that. I don't want to jingle when I move. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And your purse doesn't have to weigh as much. Right. So these were truths. The chicken dinner you ate came from a chicken, didn't come from a 3D printer and protein goop. Yeah. When we look at Beyond Meat, it soared, it was incredible, and then everyone's like, yeah, but I still like sausage. Yeah. But the fake and falsehood never has a chance to stay in place. Gold and silver stays in place and will always be something you can depend on and always be credible and viable because it is real.
Okay, so how do the interest rates play into that? And what power does President Trump have over the interest rates and lowering them?
He doesn't have any. He can put a pressure, and he pressured Powell the first time around. Cut rates. He also is pressuring Powell to weaken the dollar. So the DXY is the symbol for the dollar index that compares it just gives let's think of it as maybe a thermometer. Mm-hmm. So when the dollar's up around 100, that's pretty hot. That means it's harder for our stuff to be sold in other countries and easier for their stuff to get sold here. So if the dollar's in the 80s, and I'm not a financial advisor and a trained economist, but if the dollar's in the 80s, then it's easier for our companies to export and get our stuff sold in other countries, and it's harder for their stuff to get sold here.
Exactly.
So he was beating up on Powell about our dollar's too strong, find ways to weaken the dollar as a currency. Our money continues to weaken. On average, 2 pennies of buying power a year is lost since the year 2000. Now that number eventually hits somewhere near zero.
Right.
And then you got massive issues.
Right.
So if we're going to have, and when my thought comes about closing the borders to having anything imported here, unless it's French wine. Yeah. Because the world needs Italian and French wine, and there's some certain things we need, and you would have a list of things we just can't make here. We'll bring that in. Yeah. We need avocados, Chinese fireworks.
Or whatever.
We need Chinese fireworks.
Yes.
We can't have military uniforms made in China. This is the stuff. Like, we can't have American flags made in China. We can't have stuff made there. I don't care what it costs. Go without then.
We want to thank Paul Stone for being with us today and talking about Colonial Metals Group. And we hope to see you next time.
It's the Judge Jeanine Show. This is the Jeanine Pirro Show. Now, here's Judge Jeanine Pirro.
Okay, now it's time for me to gavel out with my closing argument. Well, you heard it from Paul Stone. The guy knows what he's talking about. We've got a lot of problems with the dollar, with the economy, but President Trump is doing everything he can, along with Elon Musk, to make sure that our dollar is protected. And in the end, we've got to wait to see how much money they can eliminate. And I think you're going to be shocked based upon the waste, fraud, and abuse going on in the federal government. You know what, folks? Nobody cared. Nobody gave a damn. These people in Congress, it's all about their making money for their next campaign and about their enriching themselves. You know what? I recommend that you go look at those people who joined Congress in the last, 20, 30 years, what they were worth when they joined and what they're worth today. It is a sad commentary. It's time to get them the hell all out and make sure that we've got truth in legislation and truth in Congress. And it's time that we impose term limits so that these people cannot spend decades in Washington and make a fortune. That's it for me. Have a great day, everyone. I'll be here next Sunday, same time, same place. And it'll be interesting to see what happens during the week because it's always something. Take care. God bless.